Let's first hear from Shadow.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. I want to thank the committee for an elaborate report. But as an able shadow minister, I wish to add that of the challenges of the foreign affairs sector has been on policy. Madam Speaker, if you could recall, the Minister of Foreign Affairs was supposed to table a codified foreign policy by June last year. We have not been updated, and we perceive it as a contempt of Parliament, at least for us as opposition. We need to get a better understanding
not as opposition, as the House.
As the House.
Because the contempt is to Parliament, not to opposition.
Thank you for the guidance. Only that I was submitting as a shadow minister. And I wish to represent, first of all, the alternative government. We need to learn how far. And two, Right Honorable Speaker, under NDP 3, we are talking about, for example, of ECD and funding, enhancing funding for ECD. The NDP 3 provided for a diaspora investment strategy that had to be finalized in the first year. Up to now, we don't have such a strategy for the diaspora, whereas we fund missions for diaspora mobilization and engagement. We are worried. Position. The diaspora is being mobilized for what and to do what without a policy. There is no proper guidance as to how and for what the diaspora is mobilized for. But the would-be guidance will be under NDP 3, which required a diaspora investment strategy that would guide in the development of a diaspora engagement policy. As of now, we don't know they are mobilizing the diaspora for what, much as there is funding allocated to some of these missions. Thirdly, Madam Right Honorable Speaker, is on protocol and consular services. Whereas we agree that there is need to fund and enhance the provision of consular services across our missions and embassies. But we are also seeing a weakness by the Foreign Ministry. Right Honorable Speaker, our passport ranking and index is so low. Our passport is lower, by index is lower than Kenya and Tanzania. We even have countries which are visa exempt for Uganda, but we don't have the reciprocal arrangement where equally Ugandan passport holders can enter those countries visa-free. And this is a challenge. Much as we are proposing funding, and this is equally related to public diplomacy. Right Honorable Speaker, when it comes to realignment of our embassies and missions, we must be alive to realities. We are recommending funding. I want to give an example of our mission in Russia. It's the same mission accredited to cover Ukraine. Now, these are countries at war. You cannot be a diplomat in Russia representing Uganda and you purport to appear in Ukraine. These are countries at war. We believe there must be a realignment as we pursue enhanced funding. Because equally when it comes to travel, the embassies are talking about travel abroad, which is right. Because many times when you raise issues of the labor externalization, they say we want money to reach these areas. But some of these might be affected by policy and the rationale of accreditation. If we don't realign our missions to actually be alive to international realities. And lastly, Right Honorable Speaker, is to do with bilateral labor agreements. The aspect of labor externalization has been echoed in this Parliament day after day. And the answer from the Minister of Foreign Affairs has been, we don't have money for travel. And it is also true that some of our ambassadors have not presented their credentials to other countries of the world, alleging travel, lack of travel. It was so. Right Honorable Speaker and colleagues, we want also to learn. The Minister of Foreign Affairs is talking about bilateral agreements. We hear some of these ministers parading what they call agreements out there. But when you go to these countries, there's an allegation that these agreements are not enforceable. And the enforceability may have a bearing on the budget. It is not brought for us to in Parliament to understand the realities of how to enforce these engagements, these bilateral agreements. We want to learn from the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Much as we have a state minister, the Foreign Minister, Right Honorable Speaker, I have not seen him, J.G. Odong, since I became a shadow minister. I don't know whether he exists, but I hear he swear somewhere, he took oath somewhere. I've not seen him. Right Honorable Speaker, we want to learn how many bilateral agreements have been enforced. We hear, for example, with UAE, we hear of a bilateral agreement, but we understand it's not enforced. How many have been signed? How many have been enforced? Honorable Speaker and colleagues, as I conclude, when it comes to international subscription, it is shaming that the Republic of Uganda by last year failed to pay subscription to the African Union. And we understood as a committee that our ambassador...
Actually, we didn't fail to pay, we delayed. There is no way we can fail to pay. We delayed.
I take your guidance, Honorable Speaker. But now, our ambassador who to the African Union, and she alleged that she was denied entry in the meetings of African Union. Now, when we are building African nationalism and patriotism on the African continent, but we don't comply with our commitment on international obligation, especially on strategic institutions like the African Union, it is a shame. We need to understand from the Minister of Foreign Affairs going forward what is the strategy, and equally from the Minister of Finance, because when they were presenting the budget and most of these estimates, we are discussing in terms of sectors. Many times when they are realigning to now the program approach, a number of these proposed priorities are disregarded. I don't know how best we are going to safeguard this process to ensure that what has been recommended is actually actualized. I beg to submit, Right Honorable Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
We've made remarkable progress in trying draft 1. But as colleagues may be aware, the ministry does a function delegated by His Excellency the President, who is the chief diplomat in any case, and we did forward the foreign policy proposal to him for clearance and onward transmission to Parliament. In a recent meeting, Madam Speaker, because of the global fluidity that we have of global affairs, we've been advised that Uganda may not come out very, very fast to coin out a steadfast written foreign policy, but continues to deliver our foreign policy in the ministerial policy statements as contained thereunder. Madam Speaker, we shall continue to wait for the advice of the chief diplomat in that regard. Madam Speaker, permit me also to mention on the issues of areas to international obligations. Indeed, I want to confess to this House that I think Uganda quite often has looked ugly in respect to meeting obligations, especially assessed contributions to international organizations to which we subscribe. First of all, in respect of the our foreign policy, as contained in the Constitution, we are supposed to respect international obligations such as treaties and agreements, which we are part. And therefore, part of the respect is actually meeting the assessed contributions. So quite often, we've not looked very well. And therefore, when we talk about travel abroad, it includes missions abroad, among others, to permit for heads of missions accredited to multilateral stations to present credentials in those other countries where they are accredited, apart from the sitting station, but also to perform consular and diplomatic functions to which they are called to play. It's therefore important that this Parliament supports restoration of a budget of Ministry of Foreign Affairs for travel abroad. Madam Speaker, it also goes to the matter raised earlier on by one honorable colleague, where it has been observed that we do not classify and reclassify these ministries, these missions abroad. This equally calls for travel abroad to do annual and sub-annual inspection. Without this travel abroad, we may not know what is obtaining in missions. And as you're aware, the world is very dynamic, the geopolitics is very dynamic. We need the inspectors to travel abroad to go and assess and therefore inform the standing of the mission at that point in time. Issuance of passports, Madam Speaker. It's true, previously, our 3 missions in London, Washington, and Pretoria had been permitted to issue passports. However, due to funding shortage, that role has been recalled. We'd also like to pray that funds be availed to support the budget for issuance of passports, because this is a right given to citizens of Uganda, both within and outside. Madam Speaker, a few observations which were made by the Shadow Minister. Yes, the other one was about the foreign policy, which I have already answered. The strategy, if you look through the National Development Plan, followed by our own ministerial policy statement, which we submitted, we do provide for strategies, policies and strategies on how to mobilize diaspora. And diaspora is provided for 3 things. 1, foreign direct investment. 2, investment of receipts from outside, earnings from the diaspora, but also for purposes of solidarity and cohesion of members abroad, of Ugandans abroad. Now, about MOUs and bilateral agreements not enforceable. Madam Speaker, this appeared to be extremely broad and sweeping, which I would like maybe if you can give me a precise report about which agreement is not enforceable from which country. Otherwise, as to us, I'm only clarifying, I'm only responding to what you said. Madam Speaker, as far as we are concerned as a country.
Can we have the MOUs that are not recognized brought on the floor so that the minister can be able to say?
Right Honorable Speaker, I wanted to give the minister information on 2 issues. One, on diaspora engagement, he's talking about a strategy. But as it is now, our foreign missions have no guidance.
Which MOUs are not enforceable?
Honorable Speaker,
that have been
when it comes to the MOU, the one for United Arab Emirates, that is properly known as Dubai by the public, is not enforced. And we need to understand how far. Last time we had the Minister of Gender waving to the public another new MOU, I think, with Qatar. We don't know what is even the content. And I hear even Jordan. So we need clarity on these MOUs and what is the arrangement for their enforcement. If it requires a budget, we plan for it and budget for it.
Madam Speaker, the relationship of nations are corresponded to through the normal diplomatic channels. When we enter an MOU, an agreement between nations, if there are areas of discontent or contention whatsoever, they are responded to formally. And to this extent, Uganda has not received any complaint whatsoever from government of UAE to the effect of failure to enforce any of the agreements, unless laid on table and unless it comes through us, through the normal diplomatic channels, then we shall respond. Now, the issue of having the ambassador of Russia, Uganda as a representative in Russia, as at the same time being a representative to Ukraine. Madam Speaker, it doesn't have any harm whatsoever because, number one, Uganda is not concerned about the quarrels between the 2 nations in question, because to even emphasize on that, we are members of non-aligned movement. Therefore, we don't poke our nose in the affairs of any of those 2 countries, but also provide for under the Vienna Convention of 1969 on diplomatic relations. There is no law whatsoever violated if you have a representative of in one nation also representing in another nation where these two nations do not have diplomatic ties. It's therefore right.
Rice.
Finally, on the issue of